response to Josh Burns' organic permaculture garden on Gardening Australia has been absolutely stunning. Look, people have written in from all parts of Australia and they want to know how they too can actually grow their own fruit and vegetables and other plants without the use of poisons or disruptive chemicals. And that's what this DVD is all about. It's a detailed history of Josh's garden, as it was conceived, as it develops and how it works. And as far as we're concerned, it's nothing more than a practical, down-to-earth guide to action. So, good luck and happy, safe gardening.
Permaculture is a practical approach to the problems facing modern society, based on a philosophy of think global, act local, and is equally as relevant to an inner city courtyard as it is to a broadacre farm. It's all about finding creative solutions to living a more sustainable life by growing local organic food, reducing energy consumption, recycling our wastes, and creating habitat for other life around us. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to show you how to create a productive permaculture system step by step, which will include veggies, fruit trees, poultry, ponds, worms, composting, and more. We'll look at how to heat and cool the house with good garden design, as well as how to save water by reusing grey water and through efficient irrigation. Best of all, it's going to be cheap and it's easy to do. The property is typical of many in Perth, just under a quarter acre in a quiet suburban street. The climate is classic Mediterranean, long, hot, dry summers and short, wet winters. There's a slight west-northwest slope with good northern solar access. Aside from the rundown original cottage, there's also a workshop and an old shed that I'll convert to a studio. The first step is designing the site, which is the key to permaculture success. We start by observing and noting the summer and winter sun angles, prevailing winds, the degree of slope on the block, as well as any views that we want to keep or screen out. When overlaid on a plan showing existing structures, vegetation and access ways, we create the framework for our design. We want to shade out hot summer sun whilst allowing in warming winter light, and windbreaks are planted to shield strong winds. Slope is used to move water without pumping, and an ugly fence can be screened out. Next, we create conceptual zones on our plan and place the various elements in our system according to how often we have to visit them, saving us time and energy. The basic idea is to place the things that are used regularly nearer the house. Things that need less attention can be placed further away. On a suburban block, I use 3 zones. Zone 1 will include herbs, veggies, and the outdoor living areas. In Zone 2, I'll put poultry, worm farm, pond, and workshop. In Zone 3, we'll find fruit trees, extended poultry runs, composting bays, firewood, and material storage. Now we consider the permaculture principles of relative location and multiple function to create an efficient and integrated system. Relative location involves grouping elements together to form beneficial relationships, where the needs of one are met by the outputs of another. A classic example is chickens ranging under fruit trees to feed on fallen fruit, weeding and fertilising as they go. Also, every element should perform a number of functions. For example, a poultry pen fence for containing chooks can also act as a trellis for espalier trees, which then screens out an unsightly view. As environmentally conscious gardeners, how we go about preparing and building a permaculture system is just as important as how we maintain it. When it comes to making a start on site work, there's normally a heap of cleaning up to do, particularly on an old block like this. So to help me get through it, I organise regular busy bees with friends and neighbours. It's a great way for skill sharing and for building local communities. It really does help get through the work much quicker. Today, we're under pruning these gum trees, which will allow more light through to a future understory of productive trees and shrubs. Getting in a chipper means that the prunings can be instantly converted to mulch. Anything too large for the chipper can be cut and stacked for firewood. This is how the property looked last winter. Since then, we have removed unwanted plants, lopped trees and slashed weeds, but nothing has left the site. Everything is turned into compost or mulch to build the soil. Likewise, we have pulled apart old fences, pathways and retaining walls and have kept all the materials for future use, minimising waste and saving money. There are no absolutes in permaculture, and every garden is different, but the more time you spend observing, planning and designing, the more likely you are to have success. Permaculture gardens are always evolving as we come up with new ideas and discover new relationships in the garden. So don't be discouraged if you have a few teething problems. So I need to get to work making compost. The next step in this project is to get the kitchen garden started to supply us with fresh veggies and herbs. The block's been cleaned up, I've done my design, and now it's time to get on with the business of growing food. Today my friends and I are going to set up the veggie garden, and we'll show you how to do it from scratch. The veggie garden's going in the front yard because it gets good sun all year round. It will consist of a main cropping area of 24 square metres, divided into 4 separate 5 square metre vegetable beds for the purpose of crop rotation, with half a metre access paths between each bed. Picking greens and herbs will be planted in a strip along the main path for easy access. A garden of this size will produce enough fresh veggies for about 4 people. Perennial companions will be planted along the borders, and further back on the verge and along the fence line I'll plant bird-attracting natives. A small pond has just gone in and will bring snail-eating frogs to the garden, and will also ensure that beneficial insects and birds have a drink over the summer. Large limestone rocks make great seats for people passing by. They also attract insect-eating lizards who love basking in the sun. Veggies need rich soil, and as you can see, this sand needs a lot of work. It's absolutely gutless and is also water repellent. To build up these garden beds, we're adding bentonite, blood and bone, and organic mineral fertiliser. Bentonite is a swelling clay that helps hold water and nutrients. We're applying this at 100 grams per square metre. Good old blood and bone is a fantastic all-round organic fertiliser, and this goes on at a generous handful per square metre. The organic mineral fertiliser is ground up rock dust and includes trace elements. That also goes on at about 100 grams per square metre. We dig all this in to about 20 to 35 centimetres. Next we apply a liquid soil wetting agent. This will help overcome the non-wetting nature of Perth's sandy soils. I'm using a new organic product which doesn't harm beneficial soil bacteria like the standard suffragant-based products do. This wheelie bin makes a handy mixing vessel. 250 millilitres of this product will cover 50 square metres. Apply it first in a watering can and then water it in thoroughly with a garden hose. This wetting agent is having an immediate effect. You need to wash it in so it really sort of gets through the top of the soil profile. Quite often it will take several applications and a bit of time to really have its full effect. But already I'm seeing that water is just sort of penetrating off the surface a lot more readily. Now we install the poly pipes, which we will run our drip line irrigation off. This is done after the digging of the soil so we don't damage the pipes. We continue to build the soil by adding generous layers of sheep manure, lucerne, more blood and bone, and then more sheep manure. Looking good, isn't it? Now, drip irrigation is water efficient and it's easy to install. Also, because it waters at the ground level and not over the foliage like sprinklers do, fungal diseases are reduced. Also, you just don't get as many weeds. You can get advice from your local irrigation retailer on how to size your drip irrigation system and what components you'll need. On sandy soil, drip lines should be spaced at 30 centimetres apart. I like to use a ruler and chalk to make sure the drip lines are installed evenly. Mark the supply line and then punch in the drip line connectors. When using drip line in veggie gardens, I like to cap the end of each line separately, rather than plugging them into a collector line, as is normally done on a grid layout. This makes it easy to move the drip line out of the way when you want to dig up spuds or add compost. Okay, we've secured the drip line with heavy-duty fencing wire and pulled it nice and taut. Being straight, it makes a fantastic planting guide for planting out your seedlings. So we're going to give the bed a really good water in, and then we'll plant it up with our brassicas and other leaf crops. When planting your seedlings, plant them right next to a dripper, so the young roots have immediate access to water. Pull the straw and manure back and get down to the original soil level. Dig it over and plant straight into it. Tease the roots just slightly and pop it straight in. Sprinkle with a tad of blood and bone, dig with a quick feed and water in straight away. Put the dripper line back and there it is. Lastly, we cover the paths with a fine mulch. You can also use sawdust. This is lovely to walk on and slugs and snails hate travelling across it. Well, it's been a great day. We're not quite finished yet, but we're getting there, and I'm sure you've got the idea. The next big project is setting up the poultry pens and planting the fruit trees. Chickens are the perfect animal for a backyard permaculture garden. They convert food scraps to eggs, clean up weeds and fallen fruit, and of course, are a great source of manure. The trick is to set them up so they work for you, not against you. They can be very destructive if let loose amongst your favourite plants. There are many ways to house chickens. I've decided to build a permanent chook house with alternating runs. In order to comply with local council bylaws, the entire closure sits 1 metre off the adjoining properties, and the main hen house has a concrete floor. The chickens will have access to 2 extended runs, so they can get out and stretch their legs, forage for food, and dust bath. The eastern run will be planted with fruit trees, in particular fleshy fruits prone to fruit fly, which the chickens will help control by cleaning up the fallen fruit and maggots. The southern run, which is shaded for most of the year, will double up as my composting and firewood storage area. The chooks will also feed on insects that breed up around the compost and the stacked wood. Each run is divided into 2 bays, so that the different sections can be rested from the relentless scratching of the chickens, and fodder crops in the form of annual grasses and legumes can be sown to provide fresh greens. The 1 metre gap between the chicken enclosure fence and the boundary fence will serve as a corridor, so the chooks can easily be moved between each area. 2 metre high fences with sunken barriers all the way around will keep the chickens in and the dogs out. The posts have been made using salvaged jarrah, which is naturally termite resistant, and they have been braced in a way that gives strength without the need to use concrete footings, saving money and materials. Chooks need protection from the sun and rain. This eave will provide some instant shelter. I'm also going to plant this fig tree. Being deciduous, it'll provide wonderful summer shade. When it loses its leaves in winter, the warming light will come in. A young tree like this will need to be protected to prevent the chooks from scratching around the roots and from defoliating the lower branches. Tyres make useful root guards. It's important to cut out the underside of the tyre so the roots don't get trapped. A chicken wire barrier will keep the foliage safe. Once the tree is established, the wire can be removed. In the remaining tyres, we're putting in plants that provide other benefits to the chickens. Wormwood repels lice and expels intestinal worms when ingested, as does rue. Tansy is known to repel fleas. As they grow, they will poke through the wire mesh, and the chooks can brush past and peck at the leaves without destroying them. The concrete floor in the main hen house is covered in 30 centimetres of deep litter for the birds to scratch around in and to soak up droppings. Wood chip mulch is a cheap option. When this batch needs replacing, it'll go straight on the compost heap. Using a deep litter in this way also helps reduce the build-up of parasites. The chooks will also need a perch to roost on at night and cosy nesting boxes for laying eggs. It's time to introduce the chooks to their new home. These guys are highline browns. They're quiet, passive, non-flighty birds that are well suited for the suburban backyard. They are fantastic layers, and at 20 weeks of age, they will start to produce eggs as soon as they have settled in. For chickens to lay regularly, they need to be well fed. In addition to kitchen scraps and free-range foraging, I'll also give these guys some grain each day. Soaking it for 24 hours beforehand makes it easier to digest, so they get more nutrition from it. It's also essential that birds have access to fresh water. A water dispenser like this one needs to be refilled weekly. Hanging the hoppers off the ground keeps them clean and out of the reach of rats. So now I've got veggies out the front and chooks out the back, and I'm absolutely loving it. Even better, there's still more to come. The next step is to get to work on my native garden. As you can see, the veggies are doing beautifully. There's always a few weeds to contend with at this time of year, but they make fantastic chook food. And with the recent arrival of the winter rains, it's time for the next step in my home permaculture project, the native verge garden. The benefits of planting natives in the garden are well known. They provide valuable urban habitat, they don't require much water or fertiliser, and they help to create a sense of place. Planting up the verge puts the space to use, and it also means that everyone can enjoy it. I'll also plant along the neighbouring fence line. But before we get started, I thought we'd wander down the street and check out a great example of a native garden, to get inspired as well as to pick up a few tips. G'day, Luke.
How are you, Josh?
I'm good, mate. And yourself?
Pretty well.
Excellent. Look, this garden is just looking lovely.
Thanks very much.
And as you know, I'm putting mine in up the road, and I'm down here for some tips, so give me the lowdown.
Well, Josh, with the verge planting, I think you've got to keep a few things in mind. Pick your species, hopefully, that are local, I think, because thematically they work well together. I've tried to tie this verge in with the existing trees, so the original structure of the jarrahs and the marries that are in this area naturally. I've put in the Banksia menziesii, I've put in local shrubs. I've kept it nice and open, as you see, so it presents itself to the house, and you haven't got any security risks.
And there's a lot of diversity here too, Luke.
Fairly good variety, and I've gone for things about a metre and a half, such as the scaevola and the Grevillea thelmaniana. These are sort of things that you can keep to a good shape, so I do work them a little bit, but heavy mulch, and at the moment I'm planting everlastings just amongst them in some open ground.
Now, before you launch into planting up your verge, there are two things you have to do. Firstly, contact your local council to get approval. And secondly, dial before you dig, to make sure you know the whereabouts of services such as power, water and gas. Because if you damage them, you have to pay. Having a plan to plant to is also important. The height of the plants will determine where they get planted. Trees and tall shrubs are best planted in the centre, towards the footpath side, and only plants with a low habit should be planted on the curbside and along the driveway, so the line of sight to the road is not obscured. This is how the verge used to look. Preparation for this area included removing unwanted plants and weeds, as well as some basic earth shaping to create an interesting profile. Getting rid of lawn and weeds can be tough work, but it's essential for the natives to do well. Now the fun really begins. We're starting by transplanting these mature zamia palms and grass trees. These stunning specimens were rescued from land clearing that would have otherwise seen them destroyed. My mate Bruce is committed to saving as many of these beautiful plants as he can, and he works tirelessly to get them out of the way of bulldozers and into people's gardens, at the same time raising awareness of the issues of land clearing.
Both the grass trees and the macrozamias transplant really well. You should expect around a 75% success rate if you water them well. That's the key success factor. We trim off the roots. In the case of the macrozamias, we want to seal off the roots so that no rotting can occur in the bulb. We apply some soil conditioners. We want some native plant-friendly soil conditions here. And we get soil from the site and put it into the hole as well. That contains important microorganisms that the plants definitely need to survive. put the plant into the hole to the finished height and slowly backfill. When we're doing this, we want to get a lot of water in and get all the soil back in around the roots, and to help with that, we use a concrete probe which vibrates the air and water and helps most of the air come out from around the root balls. Finally, we build up the soil around the base of the tree to facilitate deep watering on an ongoing basis.
Now it's time to plant the shrubs, ground covers and flowering herbs. I've got a wonderful spread of grevilleas here, including Grevillea presii, which has a lovely soft grey foliage and it's already coming into flower. Grevillea obtusifolia has a lower habit and a glossy green leaf. This one's Grevillea crymphifolia with quite a pretty little white flower. It's a bit taller and a bit more vigorous. With the flowering herbs, we've got the Conostylis, which has a pretty little yellow flower, and of course the classic kangaroo paw. This one's Acanthoxanthus manglesii. If we get regular rains this winter, most of these guys will be able to cope on their own. However, a couple of deep waterings over the summer will ensure that just about all of them survive. The native verge garden is well underway. When we've planted up and they fill out, it's going to look absolutely stunning. More importantly, the birds and insects they attract will bring this garden to life. Just look at these veggies. They've only been in the ground for 2 months and I'm already eating out of the garden every day. Now the trick to growing luscious veggies like this year after year without the use of pesticides is by bringing other life into the garden to create a balance. And we do this by making habitat. Now I've already got loads of companions and my natives out the front, so the next step in my home permaculture project is to set up the constructor wetland out the back. In permaculture, we draw inspiration from local natural systems as a guide when designing. My constructor wetland is modelled on the natural wetlands which occur in Perth that rise and fall with the water table. In winter, it will fill up, overflow and recharge the shallow aquifer. In summer, the level will drop due to evaporation, so the plants will need to be able to handle partial drying out. There are 3 sections to this wetland: an open water section, a lined sedge bed and a dry edge section with a total area of around 30 square metres. The open water section comprises less than a quarter of this in order to reduce the amount of water lost to evaporation. Locating it under partial shade further reduces evaporation. During dry weather, the sedge bed and dry edge plants will be irrigated with just enough grey water to keep them looking good. The overall result is a visually impressive feature with relatively modest water requirements. As you can see, we're off to a good start. We've dug the hole and stabilised it with old pavers, slabs and carpet that we salvaged during the clean-up of the site. Now, sand is great to dig in, but it must be stabilised to prevent it from slumping. This ridge will set the high water point for the open water section, so it's important that we get it level and stable. A piece of straight timber and a spirit level tells us that we're on track. Next, we mark the high water mark on the slabs with a piece of chalk. The outer edge of the liner will be laid beneath this point, allowing the overflow to soak away. The pond's been dug to 1 metre. There'll be about 20 centimetres of sand on the base, which will give a water depth of around 80 centimetres. In summer, as the level drops, the sides will be exposed, but there'll always be some ponding water at the bottom. In winter, when it fills up, it'll overflow, feed the outer sedges before soaking away. Laying the liner can be a bit awkward, particularly in windy weather. The trick is to do it carefully, so it's not damaged in the process. This product is 0.4 millimetres thick, UV stabilised and is guaranteed for 10 years. Steel pins will hold the liner in place. Now, this is the overflow point, so it doesn't matter that we're puncturing the liner. There we go, nice and secure. Next, we cover the liner with jute matting, which helps the sand cling to the liner on steep sides until the plants get established and the roots can hold it in place. We're using the sand from the hole to fill the base of the outer section, with clean wash sand on top. We're also using the clean sand for the open water section, because this locally sourced material doesn't bring with it the nutrients that can quickly turn still water stagnant. Native wetland plants are available from specialist nurseries, and you can also ask for advice about species local to your area. I'm going to plant Schunoplectus validus in the pond section. This tolerates some inundation, as does Bomea articulata. And around the upper section of the ponded area, I'll plant Juncus kraussei. On the outer section, along the back, I'll plant Juncus pallidus, which is quite tall. Along the front, which is also along the path, I'll plant this one, which is Isolepis sinua. It's a much smaller plant, only grows to 20 or 30 centimetres. And around the outside, in the dry section, I'll plant this one, Isolepis nodosa. Now it looks like a wetland plant, but it really tolerates quite dry conditions. When the pond section fills up and settles in, I'll introduce local pygmy perch, gilgies, freshwater mussels and frogs. Once established, it will be low maintenance and self-sustaining, only requiring an occasional topping up of water during dry weather. Needless to say, if you have small children around, you should always fence a water feature or provide some form of barrier. My local council doesn't require a fence around ponds, but I've made sure that the backyard is securely fenced off. A water feature like this has many other functions in the garden aside from just providing habitat, such as influencing microclimate, and of course it just looks beautiful. When I finish planting up this wetland, the next big step in my home permaculture project is to set up the drip irrigation system. It may seem strange to be talking about irrigation on a rainy day, but Perth's long hot summer is just around the corner and it's important to be prepared for it. You've already heard me rave on about drip irrigation. I've been using it for years and I am convinced it's the way to go. Drip line in particular, because it provides uniform watering and it is so easy to install. Originally developed for the agriculture sector, drip line is now gaining acceptance as the best option for water efficient irrigation in landscape applications. There's no overcast, wind drift or shadowing. The water's placed right at the roots where you want it. As a result, there's less weeds and fungal diseases. Just like sprinklers, there are different types of drip line and different ways to set up a system. I'm using a product that is suited for sandy soils. It has drippers at 15 centimetre intervals and each dripper discharges 1.9 litres per hour. When the lines are spaced at 30 centimetres apart, it applies water at around 40 litres per square metre per hour. I'm setting up an automated system that will irrigate selected parts of the garden as efficiently as possible. Each group of plants will be watered on a separate line. Veggies, shrubs, fruit trees and natives all have very different water needs, so it makes sense to have the flexibility to be able to irrigate them independently of each other. The first step is to conduct a pressure and flow test on my water supply to determine the maximum area that I can irrigate on each line, ensuring that the required flow and pressure is being provided to the drippers. Adjust the gate valve until the pressure dial reads 150 kilopascals. Time how long it takes to fill a 9 litre bucket and record the results. Repeat this process at 200 kPa and 250 kPa. With the time taken to fill the bucket, a soil sample and a basic plan of your garden, your irrigation retailer will be able to recommend a suitable drip line product, the maximum station sizes for each line, as well as the pipe sizes for your supply lines. If you buy your materials from them, they'll normally do this for free. I've done my calculations and I know that one supply line will be adequate for each group of plants because they're relatively small areas. I've also determined the pipe size of the supply lines. I'll use 25mm poly for the long runs and 19mm poly for the short runs. Running the supply lines along fences and the edges of pathways reduces the chance of them being damaged. If you need to cut across an open area that you're likely to be digging in, bury the pipe a little deeper and consider putting it in a protective sleeve. For grouped plantings, run parallel lengths of drip line along the garden beds and connect one end into the polypipe supply line using a punching tool and drip line connectors. Pin the drip line in place using wire pins made from fencing wire or old coat hangers. I like to cap each length of the drip line individually with a piece of 13mm poly, so I can easily move it out of the way when building up the soil, then place it back on the surface afterwards. When installing drip line to individual shrubs and trees, create a spiral around the base corresponding to the canopy. Make sure you keep the lines even to ensure uniform watering. This technical Lego looking device is really very simple. I had a plumber cut into the house water main and install a ball valve, which is the manual shut-off to the irrigation system. Next, I've installed a backflow preventer to prevent suck back into the scheme water supply, followed by a master valve, which opens in conjunction with the other line valves. It acts as a backup in case one of these fails. This water meter will help keep track of just how much water I'm using in the garden. Good filtration is essential in drip systems, as is a pressure regulator to ensure that low pressure fittings don't burst. On each line, I've also installed a vacuum breaker, so when the valve shuts off and the water drains away, air is sucked in through here rather than through the drippers, preventing soil being sucked in and causing blockages. A good controller is at the heart of an automatic irrigation system. This one has flexible start times and duration of operation so that watering can be tailored to each group of plants. It's also in a convenient location, so there's no excuse not to turn it off when the weather changes. Once the system's up and running, the two key maintenance tasks are cleaning the filter at least once a month, more often if using dam or bore water, and flushing the lines at the beginning and the end of the irrigation season. This removes any material that has made it past the filter and settles in the lines. If you're new to irrigation, don't be daunted. Just think of it as big kids Lego. And don't be shy to ask for advice from your local irrigation retailer. It's their job to help you get it right. Water is in short supply all around the country, and gardeners are the first ones to feel the pinch of water restrictions. Irrigating efficiently, building up the soil with organic matter, and mulching are all proven ways of reducing water use in the garden. But why not take the next step and reuse your grey water? This is household wastewater that hasn't come into contact with a toilet. It includes shower water, laundry, and hand basin water. Typically, kitchen water is excluded because it contains a large amount of food wastes, fats, and oils. Every day, the average Australian household produces around 400 litres of grey water that's suitable for reuse in the garden. So how do we go about it? Each state and territory has slightly different regulations when it comes to wastewater and what you can do with it. So check with your relevant state authority. I'm installing 2 new systems which have recently been approved in WA and are the first of their kind in the country. This unit is designed to divert water from the washing machine to the garden. The beauty of this system is that it doesn't require any major modifications to the plumbing and is suitable for most houses. It's a system that everyone can set up. The washing machine empties into the tank after passing through a disc filter. When the tank fills up, it discharges and the water is directed to the garden via this pipe. Any overflow from the top will make it through this pipe and goes to sewer. Likewise, in the event of it not completely filling up and discharging, any leftover water will trickle out through this bleed line and also go to sewer. How easy is that? The only maintenance is a weekly flushing of the filter. Now you're probably wondering why the pipes are purple. It's the international standard for wastewater pipes, making it easy to identify and reducing the likelihood of cross-connection with clean water irrigation pipes. I'm using the grey water from the laundry to irrigate the flanks of my constructed wetland to keep it looking lush during the dry weather. The size of the irrigation field is based on the volume of grey water generated and the soil type. We'll stagger our washing days so these plants will get a regular drink. The second system has been designed for new houses, where it's installed under the concrete pad along with the rest of the plumbing, though it can also be installed in houses like mine, where the sewage pipes can be easily accessed. The bathroom and laundry trough water enters the unit where it passes through this sponge filter and is then sucked out by a flow sensor activated pump. Any overflow is directed to the sewer, so there's no risk of backflow in the event of a malfunction. The grey water is then pumped up to a tank just like the washing machine model, and it discharges in the same way after passing through a disc filter. Any work on sewerage pipes requires a licensed plumber, and normally the system needs to be checked by a local council health inspector before it's commissioned. So once again, make sure you check with your local authorities before you start work. My mate Damien is a green plumber who specialises in water-wise plumbing. He's part of a new generation of plumbers who are keen to promote this kind of technology. There are also regulations that govern how grey water can be dispersed. When using drip line in WA, it needs to be ½ a metre from any boundary or building, out of reach of animals and covered with mulch to reduce the chance of contact. Grey water can contain disease-causing organisms, so don't use it to grow ground-dwelling vegetables. It's best to use it on fruit trees and ornamentals. And always wash your hands after contact. It's also important to be aware of the products you put down the drain, because they will end up in your garden. Do away with toxic products and turn to safer alternatives that are now available. Never use bleach, brighteners and softeners, and avoid detergents with phosphorus, sodium and boron. There's a range of different grey water systems on the market. The laundry model cost around $500 and the outdoor system around $1,500 plus installation. Some states also offer a rebate as an incentive. Now that I've set up my watering systems, it's time to get on with growing food. Fresh eggs from the chooks out the back, chives and parsley from the veggie patch out the front. It's a great way to start the day. And I'm going to knock up a quick omelette to feed my mates. They're here to help me with today's job in my home permaculture garden, which is setting up the trellis systems to utilise vertical space. Well, let's get stuck into it, guys. Greg, how about you start on the chook pen fence trellis? Mick, you're on the living fence. And Dave, well, you're on dishes.
Oh, thanks, mate. Again?
Good on you, mate. Vertical space includes structures like fences, walls and trellis frames. By using the space effectively, you can dramatically increase your available growing area, screen unsightly views, provide privacy and even help to keep the house cool by protecting it from the sun. This chicken pen fence has been set up not only to keep my chooks in, but also to act as a frame to grow espaliered trees against. It's essential that it's solid so it won't blow over when the trees are established. The timber capping along the top will prevent the post from being pulled in when the trellis lines are tightened. High tensile wire is fastened using fencing gripples, which allow the wire to be retensioned if it slackens off. We've prepared the holes by digging in manure and mineral mix. Next we're going to plant almonds and pomegranates. Now they're not typically espaliered, but they do very well. It also makes it handy to net them to prevent birds from raiding the fruit and nuts. You'll notice that we've attached the chicken wire to the inside of the post and the trellis lines on the outside, giving us enough room to be able to get in there and prune off any shoots as the trees grow so we can keep that two-dimensional shape that we're after. I'm pruning these back hard to a strong frame and I'm looking for outward-facing buds that will direct the new growth to where I want it to go. Next, it's into the hole and we'll give it a good watering in to get rid of any air pockets. One of the first things I did when I moved into this house was to pull down the remains of a decaying picket fence. I have a wonderful neighbour who enjoys the extra feeling of space as much as I do. Having said this, some privacy is also important, so I've designed this living fence to give us partial screening without boxing ourselves back in. These Jarrah power poles have been sunk into concrete footings and they are as solid as a rock. Once again, a piece of timber capping along the top will allow us to tension the steel cables without any risk of pulling in the posts. These are 1-year-old mulberry cuttings and as you can see they are ready to burst. They're the Hicks Fancy variety, which are much more vigorous than the Old English type, not quite as tasty but they're still good and they're perfect for use in a living fence. As they grow, I'll weave them through the trellis lines and give them a prune as necessary to help them fill the space evenly. The simplest method to utilise vertical space is to hang a trellis along an existing fence. Here we're using old steel Rio mesh, but of course there's all sorts of materials that can be used. Because this fence is asbestos, I have no intention of drilling into it. Instead, we're using steel hanging basket hooks to neatly hang it in place. Along the base, I'll plant several varieties of passion fruit, which will provide loads of fruit as well as cover this depressingly grey fence. Once they're onto the trellis, I'll just nip back the main shoot, which will encourage them to spread out. The beauty of this method is that if the fence is ever replaced, the trellis can be carefully taken off and hung on the new fence without damaging the vines. Well, the day's work's done, and now it's homebrew time. Keeping your busy bee helpers well fed and watered is the key to bringing them back. Just about everything we do in the house and garden generates some kind of organic waste. But of course, it's not waste at all. It's a resource just waiting to be utilised. All of this material can easily be converted into eggs, manure, worm castings and compost. The trick is to set up systems to make it a hassle-free process. Now that my home permaculture project is well underway, with veggies, chooks and fruit trees, I need to be able to feed them to ensure healthy growth, as well as to make sure I get a regular supply of eggs. I also want to make sure that I can deal with my own green waste on site, rather than having it carted away for someone else to take care of. I want to deal with it in my own backyard. The key components in my home organic recycling system are the chooks, a worm farm, cone-type composting bins and composting bays, and they're side by side in Zone 2. Further from the house are the compost bays in Zone 3, because they only require occasional attention and work. The chooks are at the top of the food chain. Along with their staple diet of mixed grains and free-range foraging, I give them the deluxe food scraps. Pretty much anything you'd be happy to eat, the chooks will have a go at. Just like us, they don't like citrus peelings or raw potato. They're also not big fans of onion or hot and spicy food. But rather than just letting this stuff rot on the ground, I put it into cone-type composting bins, where it slowly breaks down, ready for later use. Sometimes these bins can get a little wet and sour. If this is the case, simply add a couple of handfuls of lime and some manure and some dry material. Then give it a good forking over to allow air in. To keep them in a healthy state, a good rule of thumb is to add equal amounts of dry to wet material. The chooks also love a regular handful of weeds and soft prunings from the veggie garden. The best thing is, these little wonders convert this into beautiful eggs and rich manure. Worms are the next willing workers in the system. I feed them chopped up veggie garden waste, shredded envelopes and toilet rolls, as well as kitchen scraps. Just like the chooks, the worms aren't interested in citrus or onion, so these go into a cone composting bin set up nearby for convenience. Burying the base by about 30 centimetres helps to prevent cockroaches and rats from getting in. And by having it next to a fruit tree, it becomes a constant source of fertiliser for the tree. Having a couple of these guys on the go means you can rotate them so they're less likely to turn nasty. The castings that these guys generate really are valuable, so use them wisely. I use it for making a liquid feed to fertilise my veggies, where a small amount goes a long way. 1 handful to a 9-litre watering can, applied fortnightly, really keeps them pumping along. The bulk biomass that's generated from the garden, such as veggie crop material, leaves, weeds and shredded tree prunings, all goes into composting bays. To beef it up, I add grass clippings that a mate brings from his mowing allowance. He brings me quality grass clippings that are weed-free and haven't been sprayed. Thanks, mate. Very good of you.
Too easy, mate.
I'll get you some eggs. The trick to turning this stuff into quality compost is to get a good mix of material. Add manure and water, build it up to a cubic metre, then give it a regular turn. This simple setup has been made using salvage timber and corrugated tin. New material is loaded into the first bay. When it has heated up and cooled, I'll turn it over into the next bay, then the third and finally the fourth. adding additional manure and water each time to ensure that it continues to heat up and break down. If turned every fortnight, the final product's ready to use in about 8 to 10 weeks in warm areas, a little longer in cooler areas. This is the stuff that I use to build up my veggie beds and spread around my fruit trees, to build up soil structure and provide nutrients. Isn't it beautiful? I could just about curl up and go to sleep in it. Well, now that I've got my watering system set up and my soil building program's well underway, it's time to get on with some serious planting, and for that, I'll need to get propagating. By setting up a well-organised home nursery area, I'll be able to produce loads of plants cheaply and easily. And as always, with a bit of preparation and planning, the whole process will be a pleasure rather than a chore. Nursery plants need regular attention, so I've placed it on the edge of zones 1 and 2, right next to the workshop. It's clearly visible from the back door, so I can see if the plants need watering. It also has good access from the driveway, so I can cart in soil, pots and plant stock. The key features of the setup are an undercover workstation with a potting bench, a trough for washing pots, and storage areas for pots, trays and tools. An old whiteboard comes in handy to jot down notes, and a pin-up board is perfect for pinning up envelopes full of seeds. There's a shade frame for protecting new plants and a general purpose bench that can be used for hardening off plants after being under shade or for resting portable cold frames on during the cooler months. The benches are positioned in full sun and are made from metal as wood can harbour fungal diseases. The shade frame has a hood of 50% weave shade cloth that can be rolled right back in winter months. And both benches are mounted on casters, so I can easily roll them out of the way if I need to get access through the garage and up the driveway. There's a number of ways to propagate plants, the simplest being from seed, taking cuttings, or by division. So let's start by sowing some veggie seeds. Pots and trays are easy to come across. Most people have a stack in the back shed. These small tubes are perfect for veggie seedlings. Wash them to remove any dirt, then soak them in a bleach solution to sterilise them. I'm using a good quality propagation mix which is suitable for both raising seedlings and for striking cuttings. It holds moisture while still being free draining. Unlike potting mix, it doesn't contain any fertiliser, which means the young plants work harder to develop strong roots. These tomato seeds are easy to handle, so I can place one seed in each pot. With smaller seeds, I sprinkle them on and thin out the stronger seedling in each pot, a week or two after germination, to prevent crowding. Once a tray of pots is sown, I immediately write down the plant name, variety and date on a label so I don't lose track of what I've just sown. It's the same process as for capsicums, eggplants and chilies. The really big seeds, like beans, melons and corn, I'll directly sow into the garden. Root crops, like radish and carrots, are also best directly sown into the garden because the transplanting process can damage the root, causing stunted tubers. Once I've done a few trays, it's out to the shade frame for a gentle watering in. Hand watering is the most efficient way to water small benches. Be sure to use a gentle misting nozzle so you don't blast the seeds out of their pots. One of the best things about growing your own from seed is that you can use non-hybrid stock that remains true to type. In fact, the only way that will keep these wonderful heirloom varieties alive is by growing them in our own backyards, carefully saving the seed and then sharing them with friends and neighbours. Now it's back to the potting bench to take some softwood cuttings. Most herbaceous perennial plants will readily take from cuttings, particularly when done during the warmer months. Plants like wormwood, cistus and pelargonium are amongst the easiest. Cut lengths of healthy stem into 7cm pieces, making sure that several buds or nodes are visible along the length. Remove all the leaves from the base and off the top by 2/3. Then stick it into a pot. It's that easy. Keep them under shade until they establish and then harden them off before potting on or planting out. This simply involves gradually exposing them to full sun so they toughen up. In dry weather, placing a plastic cover over the top will increase the humidity and prevent them from drying out. make sure there's still adequate ventilation to prevent the chance of fungal diseases. Now, some plants are a lot fussier, requiring bottom heating and rooting hormone to get them going. Cut your teeth on the easy ones and take it from there. Another simple way to propagate is by division. Most running and clumping plants can be divided. Cannas, coastal swordsedge and lemongrass all fall into this category. Now, you can be as delicate or as drastic as you like. You can take the younger plants from the outside of a mature plant without causing much disturbance, or you can get stuck in there with a spade, dig it up, carve it up and pot it up. A handy tip is to keep 2 pairs of secateurs. A good, clean, sharp pair for taking your cuttings, and an older pair for getting stuck into the roots. Well, I'm off to roam the neighbourhood in search of plant stock. Over the year, you see my mates and I convert a rundown old suburban block into a water-efficient and productive permaculture garden step by step. It's been heaps of hard work, but loads of fun. And now it's time to take a look at the whole process. It started with a sound design. By observing and noting summer and winter sun paths, wind direction, slope and view sectors, trees and structures are placed so as to provide shade in summer whilst allowing warming winter light in. Windbreaks shelter us from strong winds, and unsightly views can be screened out and pleasant views maintained. Next, I create conceptual zones and place key elements based on how often I'll visit them, saving time and energy. Herbs, veggies and outdoor living areas are right near the house in Zone 1. The chooks, worm farm, shed and workshop are in Zone 2, and the extended poultry runs, compost bays, firewood and material storage areas are down the back in Zone 3. When it came time to clean up the block, we salvaged the useful material, chipped our prunings into mulch and composted the weeds. The compost has been returned to the soil, winter veggies planted and harvested, and now it's time for summer crops like tomatoes, eggplants, beans and corn. Then came the chooks. They can be rotated between different sections via this corridor and small access gates.
Good girls.
So their relentless scratching can be put to efficient use rather than wreaking havoc. I've given them the run of a large section of the backyard where they'll be put to work weeding and cleaning up fallen fruit. Half the garden's been planted to local natives, which of course are perfectly suited to the local soil and climate. They're absolutely beautiful, but perhaps most importantly, they provide valuable urban habitat, attracting beneficial insects and birds, which help keep pests under control. Water conservation is one of my top priorities, so I built this wetland modelled on locally occurring wetlands which fluctuate with the seasons. And although these plants can handle drying out, I'll irrigate them with grey water over the summer to keep them looking lush. The rest of the household grey water is used to irrigate fruit trees and garden beds. Other parts of the garden that require irrigating are watered via drip line. Veggies, shrubs, trees and vines are all on separate stations so their watering needs can be individually catered for. Vertical trellis systems have been set up along fence lines to grow vines and espaliered trees, saving space and eventually helping to screen out drab views. And finally, this home nursery setup is the perfect place to propagate, so I can gradually fill my garden with my favourite plants, with stock collected from friends and neighbours. In this small area in front of the house, I'm going to get stuck into plant stacking. It involves creating a number of layers in the garden to maximise the use of space. Now, with a bit of thought, planning and careful species selection, in this small area of around 15 square metres, I'm going to be able to squeeze in over 30 productive, edible, useful and beautiful plants. I started planting out this bed last winter, but it's looking a little tired after a long hot summer and I'm really keen to get it cranking again. I reckon the cool of winter is perfect for landscaping. I've already made a start by putting in some paving. Now with the plant stacking, I'll start at the back. What I'll do is put these olives along an espalier trellis line to form a beautiful backdrop to the garden. I like to use old tyre inner tubes to tie back trees on trellis lines. It's nice and soft, it's flexible, and of course it's a great reuse of materials. To create the next level, I'll plant into these large clay pots. They cost me around $50 each. And to prevent the roots drying out, I've sealed them with a non-toxic sealing agent. You can see I've placed the pot directly onto the soil, and because my soil's so sandy, there's no problems with any excess moisture draining away through the holes in the bottom. If you're putting it onto a heavy clay soil, think about putting it on top of a couple of inches of crushed gravel. That way, it'll make sure it drains freely. I also use the spirit level just to make sure it's nice and plumb, because there's nothing worse than a wonky pot. Growing in pots also allows you to cater for plants that like a different type of soil to other plants in the garden, such as these blueberries. I'm planting them in an azalea potting mix because they like a slightly acidic soil, just like azaleas do. In the next pot, I'm planting a dwarf pomegranate, which only grows to about 600 mil. And in this shallow pot, strawberries. It's easy to access, and of course it gets it up and out of the way of bobtails and slaters. Having these fruiting plants in pots really gets them out of the way of neighbouring competing plants. Putting large pots into the garden bed like this also gives it a great feel of instant structure. In between the pots, I've got a bay tree, which I keep pruned right back to a good shrub size. I've also got a series of pelargoniums with different leaf shapes, and it gives great texture. And when the pelargonium leaves rest against a warming clay pot on a hot day, they will release the most wonderful scents. The third layer down in front is all my rambling herbs. Now the area faces north, and it's right along this hard pathway, so it's quite hot and tough. So I've planted a range of Mediterranean herbs that thrive in these tough conditions. I've got marjoram, winter savoury, thyme, prostrate rosemary, all sorts of things. Now when the path went in, some of them got knocked about, so I'll simply replant those. But the tougher ones that have survived are ready for a good haircut. Around the corner is a little pond. I built it last year to bring frogs to the garden. These cannas make a great backdrop, but they can also run rampant. So I've dug in these pieces of corrugated iron to keep the roots contained. Lemongrass will help too, because their thick, matted roots help to restrict the canna's running rhizomes. And right down the bottom, I've got all my mints. There's eau de cologne mint, spearmint and peppermint. Now, down here, they really are trapped between a rock and a hard place, so they can't escape and strangle the rest of the plants. They also do well from all the moisture and nutrients coming down from above. Now, once I cover all these plants with this lovely loosened mulch, it's going to look absolutely beautiful. So you can see what I've done. I've managed to squeeze a heap of wonderful plants into a really small space. We've got the espalier olives at the back. We've got some fruiting plants in large pots in between. In between those, some hardy, useful shrubs and plants and fruit trees. Down below, a range of sprawling Mediterranean herbs that will spill out onto the path. Now, there's a lot of plants in here, but because of the stacking or layering effect, there's going to be reduced competition. But they'll still provide really good microclimate and protection to one another, which is important in this north-facing, hot and quite harsh site. Now, the whole thing's irrigated on drip irrigation, of course, so it's water-wise as well. I reckon in a few months' time, this is going to look fantastic. I started planting out my native verge garden last winter. So now, 12 months on, it's time to reassess successes and failures, as well as finish planting it out. Now, these grass trees have done beautifully. They've never looked back. The Zamia palms, on the other hand, really struggled. They dropped all their leaves, and I thought I'd lost them, but they've come back beautifully. And look at these grevilleas. They are just loving life. And now for the not-so-good. My mature clumps of native iris and conostylis have carked it. And the reason's quite clear. They've been swamped by velgrass, a particularly nasty and invasive weed that's really common in bushland areas. Now, these clumps of plants were transplanted legally from an area of bush that was destined to be cleared, along with the grass trees and Zamia palms. Now, the seeds came along with the clumps, and they've just swamped these little plants over the summer and starved them of moisture. So the solution is quite simple. Dig them out, compost them, and I'll plant back tube stock from a nursery where there's definitely no weed seeds. Early winter is the perfect time to plant natives in our Mediterranean climate because the cool, mild conditions and regular rains give these guys the perfect chance to get a good start before the long, hot, dry summer arrives. Now I'm going to start by replacing the conostylis. I've specifically chosen low-growing plants so I don't block the view of the road when I'm reversing out of the driveway. Planting strappy leaf plants like this in tight clusters gives a really good effect. Planting is easy in the sandy soil, and I add some slow-release fertiliser and some rock minerals as I go. Next, it's kangaroo paw. These are Mangel's kangaroo paw, which is actually the WA state floral emblem. They grow to about 600 mil, but put flower spikes up to about 1 metre. And they're red and green and just stunning. Now you can see some of the leaves have blackened off. This is called ink spot, and it's a kind of fungal disease. It's quite common in kangaroo paws, particularly when they've had overhead watering, as these would have had in the nursery. But it's no drama. I just snip them off and plant them out. Now, because these are now out in an airy, sunny position, and the only irrigation I'll get is in fact drip irrigation, the chance of this fungal disease coming back or being a problem is really reduced. I laid the irrigation pipes on the surface last year because I knew I would need to access them again. Now I've dug the trenches for them and I'll run the drip line to the new plants. You've probably gathered that I'm pretty keen on natives, particularly local natives, as they're perfectly suited to the local soil type and climate. And they're also great for local wildlife. Now, planting out the verge like this makes really good use of the space. It also flies the flag to the neighbours, showing how great native plants can look. And I've had wonderful feedback so far. Just wait till all of these plants start flowering, it's going to look absolutely breathtaking. All of these plants are from a local native nursery, and I've used tube stock because they will actually do better than more established plants in larger pots. And now it's time for mulch. This stuff is shredded tree prunings, and it's really good for native gardens. It's coarse, and even when put on thickly, it allows the soil to breathe. It smothers weeds, keeps moisture in, and because it's so thick and heavy, it doesn't blow away, even in strong winds. And best of all, it's cheap. I got this whole load delivered by a local tree pruning contractor for only $100. Imagine a neighbourhood where all our verges were planted out with local natives. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Now, before you get stuck into it, check with your council to find out what their regulations are. You might even find they have an incentive scheme to encourage you to do so. The weather's warming up and it's time to think about my summer garden. In particular, what I want to be eating. Veggies, some more herbs, fruit trees, and of course flowers to bring this garden to life. I've put the work in over winter, building up this soil by adding loads of organic matter. And this is the key to ensuring what I plant next will survive during the long, hot months to come. Managing a smooth transition from one season to another is an important part of growing food successfully in small gardens. You can see these leeks and other root crops still have a few weeks to go. Now, my next crop in the rotation is legumes, and I want to get an early start. So I'm going to grow climbing beans on a trellis structure above them. I'm making what I call an inverted teepee, and it's simply made from a stake, 3 pieces of bamboo, and some wire tied tightly around the middle. The best thing is that this is so easy to make, it's cheap, and it can be used again next year. I'm planting my favourite climbing bean, which is the Blue Lake variety. It's great in the heat, it's a really heavy bearer, and these are seeds left over from a bumper crop last year. All it takes is 1 seed at the base of each leg, some water, and it's well and truly away. In this bed, I've cleared out half the celery to make room for tomatoes. I start by driving in a couple of solid stakes. Then I dress the soil with some blood and bone, plant these beautiful little cherry tomato seedlings, some more blood and bone, and then water it in. You'll notice that I cut spent seedlings like this lettuce rather than pulling them out, which disturbs the soil. It also means all the root biomass breaks down in the soil, feeding soil life. Then it's a dressing of blood and bone, pop in the seedlings, a bit of water, and this basil will absolutely go for it. Now the weather's warming up, it's also a great time to plant chilies. I'm putting in 3 different varieties to add some spice to my summer cooking. Not only does this variegated fish pepper go really well with seafood, but when it fills out, it'll look great. To finish off out the front, I'm going to fill out this border of companion shrubs by planting aromatic and flowering plants like pyrethrum, tansy and lad's love. Now we go around the back, and these lime trees are going on the outside of the chook run. As they grow, I'll espalier them to save space and provide some screening. Normally in Perth, I like to plant citrus in autumn so they can get a good head start before the following summer arrives. But in this instance, they're going to be irrigated by grey water, so they'll be absolutely fine. After a serious planting session, I like to give the plants a dose of seaweed solution to encourage good root development. The main thing that will keep this garden productive all through summer is the organic matter in the soil. It does take a bit of work, but the results will surprise you. This is how my front garden looked in 2003. And around the back, it was even worse. Overgrown and in a right mess. But this is what it looks like today. This is what a little bit of planning and hard work can do. Well, in fact, a lot of planning and a lot of hard work. This once neglected suburban block is now full of fruit trees, veggies, chooks, and even a wetland. In fact, loads more. It's organic, it's water-wise, and it's a really pleasant place to be. So after working on the garden for 18 months, I'm opening it up to the public as part of the Australian Open Garden Scheme, which means there's still loads of jobs to do, but it's also a good time to show you around. You know, people who get a bit daunted by this kind of garden transformation often ask me, whereabouts do you start? Well, the answer to that is really simple, and that is good planning. This is the key to any attractive and productive garden. But in permaculture, we take it really seriously. We start by observing sun angles. In summer, we want shade. In winter, warming light. Wind direction is also important to set up things like windbreaks. We can use slope to move water, and even view is taken seriously. In that way, we can make the most of lovely vistas, such as off the back veranda looking over the entire garden, and do things like screen out ugly fences with productive vines. Being mindful of resources and minimising waste is also important. Green wastes are composted and used to build up the soil. Tree prunings are shredded to make mulch, and water is applied as efficiently as possible with drip irrigation. As you can see, the hard work's really paid off. I've been eating corn, beans, celery spuds, in fact all sorts of things out of this veggie garden. And the second summer crop is well and truly underway. Out the front, on the native verge garden, things are really doing well. Under the transplanted macrozamias and grass trees, my first kangaroo paws have started to flower. A lot's happened out here, but it's all been pretty straightforward. But out the back, things have really changed. This pergola and outdoor kitchen have just gone up, providing the perfect shelter for outdoor living in summer. In fact, most of the year round. If you remember how we made this wetland using old slabs, carpet and polyliner, well, you just wouldn't recognise it now. These sedges have really come along, and frogs have even made their own way here. We've also put in paving from second-hand, locally sourced red bricks. And behind me, the old garden shed is getting its final touches to make it a very special home garden studio. I've opened up the chook run for my beautiful Australorp hens, and they'll turn in the green manure crop of vetch, peas and rye in no time. And the fruit trees are already starting to bear. With so many things to do before opening the garden, mates really do come in handy. In fact, I couldn't manage without them. I must confess I'm a bit of a compulsive gardener, and I've got such a buzz out of bringing this whole garden project together. You know, I really feel that all gardeners should be getting into composting and worm farms, drip irrigation, grey water, and most importantly, going organic. But the great thing about permaculture is how it ties all these things together as efficiently as possible. Going organic is a lot easier than people think. Most pest and disease problems can be avoided simply by establishing a diverse array of plants, keeping them healthy, and creating habitat so that natural predators help keep pests in check. Rainwater harvesting also makes sense. I've set up 3 tanks. One for drinking and cooking, one for flushing the toilet, and even one for the chooks. A gardener always welcomes rain, but maybe on my open day it could have stayed away. It didn't keep people away though. I had a steady stream of visitors all day.
It's certainly a good example of what you can do with mulches. I mean, the sand down here is just absolutely nothing. But the whole principle of the permaculture garden is the way to go, I think.
I'm just impressed with the way everything is utilised and blending the poultry in with the garden, and I'm just about to have a look at the wastewater disposal thing, which appeals to me enormously.
Sensational. Next thing, it's wonderful to have this sort of thing in your backyard. Yeah.
I'm quite impressed. Some of the techniques, the fruit trees growing up the trellis and stuff it's something to learn.
Opening up my garden to visitors today has been extremely satisfying. What makes me so passionate also excites other people. The level of interest in permaculture and organic gardening has been really heartening. But you know what? Today also means something else. In fact, something just a little bit sad. You see, my brother and sister-in-law have bought the house, and I'm handing the garden over to them. But the good news is, keeping it in the family means that I can see this wonderful garden grow and develop. It also means this beautiful little boy is going to grow up knowing how fruit and veggies grow and how real eggs should taste. The other good news is I'm off to a new garden project just around the corner. It's a much smaller garden with its own unique challenges. You know, I just can't wait.
This isn't the end of the story. For most of us, it's the beginning of a new and healthy life, growing the very best and the safest of all foods. It's as simple as that.